Welcome to this episode of the Good Leadership Podcast. Most people don't struggle because they lack ability. They struggle because they blend in, using the same approaches, the same thinking, and the same playbooks as everyone else. In a world defined by speed, noise, and constant comparison, being good enough is no longer enough. That's the core tension behind Kumar Mehta's book, The Exceptionals: How the Best Become the Best and How You Can Too. So, how do you stand out and sustain that advantage without relying on hype, luck, or constant reinvention? This episode is the second part of my conversation with Kumar, where we're going to focus on those big ideas behind what it really means to be exceptional and translate them into practical frameworks leaders and professionals can use in how they think, decide, and perform. Because being exceptional is not something you're born with, it's a system you can learn. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Good Leadership Podcast, where we explore the stories, strategies, and insights of thought leaders who inspire us to think differently and lead better. Through candid conversations and expert perspectives, we dive into the challenges, breakthroughs, and practical lessons that shape exceptional leadership. From your research, what distinguishes working hard from the kind of deliberate, structured effort or practice that actually moves someone from being just good to truly exceptional?
But when I talk about working hard, I'm talking about really working hard, not just putting the hours in, doing the deliberate, structured practice for whatever you need to get better at. It means investing the time and energy to enhance the skill. Working hard is hard. No one wants to work hard. There's all these things that come in play. There's instant gratification, but there are a few things you can do to work hard. One is have a future orientation than a present orientation. All of us we have this constant battle going on in our minds. I know I need to work on that presentation and iron it out. But yeah, my friends are going out, so I think I'm going to go out for dinner with them. And you deliberately make a choice that you know is not in your best interests. Again, that's instant gratification. So you have to get into this mindset of thinking about the future. And there are techniques to do that. One technique when I work with athletes or people in different fields, I just have them pull out their smartphone and install an aging app and take a picture of themselves. And this aging app converts you to about 15 years or 20 years older. And when you see a picture of yourself 20 years from now, you sit and you kind of spend some time with that picture, because the only thing that's going to happen in 20 years is you're going to look like that person. Everything else is to be written. But that's the only constant. If you have a deeper connection with your future self, you're more likely to do the things today that'll help you achieve what you want in that future self. So there are techniques that help you work hard. That's one that I recommend. Another thing this is a simple thing that anyone who wants to work hard can do is exercise. Exercise not only strengthens the part of your body you're working out, but it also makes your brain more resilient and makes it more adaptable to pain. And working hard is always painful. And so the simple art of exercise actually gets your brain stronger in a way that you can use towards your other tasks.
I love that. And I had other guests on the podcast talk about hyperbolic discounting. We look at our future self as a stranger. So we have to connect our future self to our present self to make sure that we are willing to make those short-term trade-offs or costs in the short term to have those bigger long-term benefits. And I've also noticed and reading and learning from Anders Ericsson about deliberate practice and how the type of practice you do is really critical to becoming exceptional. Did you encounter that in the exceptionals that you researched about this concept of deliberate practice and really working on the edge of your ability, not just repeating what they already know how to do?
Yeah, I think this kind of ties in with the hard work concept and the micro excellence concept. One of the things I encourage people to do is actually make a list of all the specific things you need to get better at as part of your deliberate practice. And it's not just 3 or 4 big things. It's maybe 20 things or 25 things you need to actually focus on. And then rate yourself on let's say a 1 to 5 scale relative to your peers at the time. And if you work on just improving the areas and trying to get them all close to 4 and 5 for those first 20 things you wrote down, you'll find that your peer group is now different because you're operating at a higher level. Then you do the same exercise with this new peer group. And you kind of repeat that. And that is an example of a deliberate way of practicing. And that is an example of not just going through the motions or putting the time in, but being very specific about what you're trying to improve.
And you have a great message about hard work in the book because it's not just about practice, but you got to work really hard. And Will Smith, and I've seen this video of him stating this exact story, and I love this story. He insists that the separation between him and anybody else is just ridiculous, sickening work ethic. And he will put in whatever effort it takes, even if it kills him. And an example he gives, if he goes up against anyone else on a treadmill, and they want to know who can last longer. And he believes either the other person's going to get off first or Will Smith is going to die trying. There's no way he's going to let anyone outwork him. I love that story that illustrates just how hard you need to work if you really want to be truly great.
I think people tend to discount that. We see these superstars on TV, but we just don't realize how hard they worked. Tiger Woods practiced for 13 hours a day. Bill Gates reportedly didn't take a vacation in his 20s. Djokovic practiced like 13 or 14 hours a day. They just are so committed to their craft. They're so committed to what they want to do. Is that nothing else is going to come in their way. And it is that the equivalent of that ridiculous amount of practice and ridiculous amount of effort. And so honestly, in the book, there's no sugarcoating it. If you want to become great at what you do, you have to outwork everyone around you. You have to do better.
And getting back to what you said earlier, time is the wrong metric for determining effort and practice. Put your clock away and immerse yourself fully in the task. If you take away the element of time and focus purely on skill development, you are more likely to push yourself harder and more efficiently. A lot of exceptionals, they have no plan B. There's that famous historical story about the leader burning the boats, right? They weren't going to turn back from Greece. It was either they were going to win or they were going to die trying. And you share Ed Sheeran's story of just relentless practice. He didn't have a plan B, just steady growth. Perhaps expand upon that example and let our leaders understand more fully what he did to become truly exceptional at his craft.
So what's the plan B? Your plan B is a safety net. You say, hey, I really want to become a world-class musician or a world-class athlete. But in case that doesn't work out, I'm going to work in my family's auto business. That's your plan B. As long as you have that plan B, which is supposed to be a safety net, it's never going to let you stretch out for that plan A of yours. It's hard to get to your plan A, as we just talked about, the effort and everything involved. And if you have a plan B, it gives you that comfort of saying, okay, well, I tried. I'm just going to go and do this now. The most exceptional people just don't have a plan B. That's it. I'm just going to do this. And that's it. Like burning the boats, the example you gave. Ed Sheeran was immensely talented at a very early age, but he just decided that he's not going to have a plan B. All he wanted to do was be a musician. He'd go and busk on the streets. He'd go and sleep on a friend's couch. All he did was sing and write music. Not only did he get his skills better, but he actually even said in an interview that if you don't have a plan B, you just keep going until plan A materializes. And that is true with just about everyone in every field who has achieved that rare level of success.
And I think that brings to mind something too, because when we see it on social media or see them in the press, they've already achieved the greatness. So we have this wrong assumption, and correct me if I'm wrong, about everything just worked out brilliantly for them. They were just destined. They had the hand of God on them that made them exceptional. But often that's not the case. Someone once told me it takes 20 years of hard work to become an overnight success. Things just don't happen the right way each time. Everyone has obstacles, has things that they have to overcome to becoming great. And we normally just see the final product.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't see what goes into it. We don't see all the behind the scenes stuff. And then we read about, some of the complicated lives or things about people who achieve that immense level of success, and we're going like, what's going on? But it is part of the DNA that made them who they are.
You state in the book that every exceptional seems to start their day, no matter how demanding, with exercise to make sure that they start the day right, which I think is instructive to many people because that's common sense, but common sense isn't often common practice. The other thing that I noted too that I thought was somewhat counterintuitive, but we kind of touched upon this, just want to go a little bit deeper on this piece, is they established a strong bond with their future self and they became more invested in making the right decisions for their future, more willing to make sacrifices today and forego immediate rewards to invest in themselves in the future. So that delay of gratification was really strong. Did you find anything in particular with those exceptionals or maybe in your life of What gave you the motivation to keep going on with an uncertain future out there that you didn't know if you were going to make it, but kept driving you forward?
So the skills you develop while you're trying to become exceptional at your craft are transferable. I came across the story of an Olympic athlete. She actually wasn't even a runner, but she was a skier, and she wanted to be an Olympic skier, but she had a ski accident and couldn't ski anymore, and so she picked up running. The skills she learned in trying to become an elite skier translated to her winning the Boston Marathon and then becoming an Olympic gold medalist. So I think that the message here is that the future may be uncertain, but the path to get there gives you skills that are transferable to anything else. That's why you see all these phenomenal athletes or people who achieve greatness in one field become these business leaders or broadcasters or transfer their skills to another field, and they do that with the same level of intensity, with the same level of effort to learn this new skill.
And some of the questions that I found to be helpful if you are vacillating between playing it safe and going all in on your biggest ambition is connect with your future self. If I were to stay exactly where I am, what does the next 5 years look like? Will I be proud of it? You're trying to bring the future to the present, or what's maybe the smallest irreversible step toward my ambition that I'm willing to take right now? Make it smaller so it doesn't feel so daunting. Because I hear this a lot from executives or from mid level leaders saying, I want to be the CEO. Well, that might be 10 positions away from you, and that might take 10 years. What's something small you can do today to get you moving in the right direction and stay committed for that period of time? Any other tools that you've seen personally or from others that would really help connect them to that vision so they move away from just playing it safe?
One tool I tend to use and I tend to advocate is something called a commitment device. Do something that's going to actually help you stay committed. It's very hard to work hard or stay committed to a task. And a commitment device is anything that'll help you focus. So when I was writing and doing my research, I just found that at times my mind would wander, and I'd kind of get out of it, and I'd just reach across the desk and pick up my phone and start scrolling. The commitment device I created for myself was I took my phone and put it in a different room. So then when I absently reached out for my phone on my desk, I realized it wasn't there. It kind of occurred to me, okay, I put it away for a reason. And a lot of people have commitment devices for any number of things. One commitment device, a simple one is, people cut up their credit cards to prevent unnecessary spending. Or there's this famous story of Victor Hugo when he wrote The Hunchback of Notre Dame. He was a partier. He liked going to all these evening affairs and socializing. And he realized he wasn't making any progress on his book. So he basically locked up all his evening wear, and he just kept a gray shawl outside that he wore every day, and he had nowhere to go to because his clothes were locked up, and he did nothing but write. So one thing I encourage is for people to have their version of a commitment device. Maybe it's doing something with a partner, because if somebody is waiting for you, you're not going to let them down. Anyway, that is just one tip that I found that works quite effectively.
There's a plethora of different commitment devices. There's even ones where you can give to your least favorite charity if you don't meet a certain goal. The other area that I'd love to go into now is just some other things that you've witnessed in exceptionals that maybe people don't realize. You point out that exceptionals don't go deeper just in their own domain, they connect ideas from other fields. You emphasize this cross pollination of learning from other fields.
So one of the Nobel laureates I interviewed won a Nobel Prize in economics. I think he was at MIT, and he started off his career with a bang, and he published some breakthrough papers. But then he realized that he was in a research rut, so to speak. He wasn't coming up with new theories, new ideas, and he decided I'm going to go ahead and learn law. I think it was at Harvard Law School, and just take classes with the law students. And he sat and he did that, completely different discipline than what he was. He even took exams. And then he found there was the intersection between law and economics that led to the groundbreaking work that led to his that resulted in a Nobel Prize. Again, that is a little bit of an extreme example of someone going very deep into another field. But the general concept is that your ideas don't only come from your discipline. Every other discipline around you is advancing just as much as yours. And you can learn and apply things to your field just by keeping an open mind, being exposed to learning, becoming a voracious reader if you have to, but just kind of being the sponge for knowledge.
Three rich sources I found to help business professionals myself are high performance sports, where the science of training, recovery, and mindset is very advanced, behavior science, which explains how people actually make decisions and change habits, and then technology and data literacy, because every domain seems to be becoming more analytical. And like you mentioned, the point isn't to become an expert in everything, it's to bring in ideas, models, and tools from other arenas and apply them creatively to your own. Because many breakthroughs come from that cross pollination rather than what I see a lot of professionals trying to do, just grinding a little bit harder on what everyone else in the field already does. That's likely not going to differentiate you after a certain level. Let's build on that idea. And you draw the distinction between elite and super elite performers. And one distinction is they have a deep need to succeed. And that's often because of a significant negative life event that becomes fuel in their life. So, why is that the case? And maybe how can ambitious professionals harness adversity productively without glamorizing the trauma or the burnout?
So there was an interesting study done with British athletes, people who are Olympic level athletes, people who had represented their country in a sport. And then that those elite athletes were compared with another group of people who also competed in Olympics or world championships for their country, but had won a gold medal and won another medal. So they, on average, they had won like 5 or 6 medals, and they were the super elite. And they said, hey, let's look at the difference between these elites who are not like you and me, who are already way up there, and compare them with these people who are kind of living in a different stratosphere. And so when the study between elite and super elite, they found that these people are same. Actually, they're like us in many ways. They all have their goals and ambitions and all their interests, and they all work hard and they all are dedicated to their craft. But what differentiated the two, with some of the concepts we've talked about, the elites kind of thought every once in a while, maybe if I give up my sport, I'll go and do something else, the equivalent of plan B. Super elites never had that idea, never even entertained the thought. They were just so committed to what they were doing. The super elites came from a very competitive environment. Ever since they were young in their homes, nothing was given, everything was a competition, everything had to be earned. And that mindset lasted them through their life. But the other interesting thing was that the super elites had an expectation of excellence. They were taught at a very early age that exceptional performance isn't reserved for those people you see on TV. You can get there. So there were all these things. But to your point, one other thing that differentiated between the two was that the super elite had kind of a chip on their shoulder. They experienced a negative event. Sometimes it was in their sport, sometimes it was a personal event, a divorce, a death, or something. And that kind of gave them the extra fuel and motivation to go ahead and really do well at their sport. And in some cases, people need to kind of create that chip on their shoulder. If you don't have one, create one. You know, find someone who wrote something about you, or find a reason to prove yourself, and that's going to help you push yourself just a little bit more.
Michael Jordan did this famously. He always identified something that brought his game up to the next level to get him angry about. And what you mentioned too is the research shows it's not the trauma that's required, but really it's the way they reinterpret the adversity in a way that gives them drive and focus. And the key is meaning making, asking yourself, given what I've been through, what kind of person do I want to turn this into? So instead of viewing setbacks as evidence that you should shrink from your goals, you treat them as clarifying moments, opportunities to double down on what matters most and to pivot, hopefully intelligently. But there's also that danger that you romanticize the pain itself, which you have to be careful with. And that really leads to the next question, because we see this a lot in leaders, especially exceptionals, I'm sure, and super exceptionals that you've researched is burnout. So they just go all in and they just burn themselves out too quickly. What are some clear signs that a person or a company has shifted from obsessing over the scoreboard into a genuine mastery, which is more healthy in the long term?
So let's talk about mastery for a second. So most people are focused on outcomes. Most people are focused on kind of this competitive mindset. But even if you're in a business world, I want to get a certain score on my annual review, or I want to do better than my peers, or whatever it is, it's always linked to someone else. And that's an outcome focused kind of way of thinking. When you think about mastery, you kind of give up on those outcomes. You're competing with yourself. You're thinking about how far you can go. I talk about this concept that you're not thinking of your personal best, you're thinking of your possible best, how far you can go. And that's what the most exceptional people do. They're less focused on competition, but they're more focused on have I achieved my potential.
That reframe, did I perform closer to my personal best rather than only did I win? So it causes you to review your process after both wins and losses, and you keep tightening your craft versus just focusing on comparing yourself to others, which they may be at different stages in their journey. And that might not be a comparison that you should be making in the first place. How about for pivot points? You mentioned also that pivot points are moments when a new coach, a job opportunity, or a setback triggers a major directional shift. Could you maybe share your favorite pivot story from your research?
Pivot points is basically opportunity knocking on your door, and you have to choose to answer it. And there have been some very public pivot points when Paul Allen showed a young Bill Gates this cover of this popular electronics magazine, 1975, about a computer that was launched and that made Gates drop out of Harvard and go ahead and start Microsoft. That's pretty well publicized. That was a pivot point, and even Bill Gates kind of admits that hey, this was the spark. There have been other sparks for different people where something has prompted them to make a change. And everyone goes through these pivot points. You have them, I have them, we all have these things. You know, we kind of feel like, oh, I should do this now. Most of the time we ignore that feeling and it goes away, but it comes back. And if it comes back often enough, then you know it's a pivot point that's asking you to do something and you need to answer the door and follow through on that opportunity. I did that. I was working at Microsoft. I didn't need to leave Microsoft. It was a nice, comfortable job. And I had a couple of opportunities to become an entrepreneur, and I kind of thought, okay, if I don't do it now, I never will. And I'm sure everyone in every career has those moments.
Absolutely. Let's talk more about these stages on the journey because you give a nice outline of what those stages are. And you say, first, it comes with early positive experiences you have about something that you're destined to do, then, systematic skill building and personal bests, and finally, a focus on mastery and being the possible best in the field. How can professionals or just individuals diagnose which stage they're in and maybe then adjust their goals and strategies accordingly?
Yeah, so let's talk about this personal best versus professional best. And most of us have this orientation that's based on personal bests. And if you're a salesperson, you say closed 9 deals last month. I want to close 10 this month. Or if you're a runner, I ran the race in 30 minutes. I want to run it in 29. Everyone operates on personal bests. The exceptionals don't. They have what I call a possible best, which is this is the North Star that I'm going after, and how do I get there? Now, the flaw with the personal best is that it's a backward looking metric. I did something in the past. How do I do a little bit better than that? And you focus on that incremental improvement. When you're looking at your possible best or something that's so far out in the future, you're not looking at incremental improvement. You're looking at transformational improvement, because the only way you can get something that's so far out and become the best in the world at something is through a transformation. So I just want to put that distinction out there. But the stages that all exceptionals have gone through, the first one, as you mentioned, is a positive experience. If you're starting something new, if you don't have positive experiences in the early part of it, if you're starting a sport or an instrument or whatever, you're just not going to pick it up unless you have some early positive experiences. You're going to quit. So the first stage is the positive stage, where you just need to kind of have that, hey, I like this. I think I want to do more of this. Then you start getting serious. Then you get to the comparative stage. Then you look at personal best. Am I winning my races? Am I beating my time? Am I beating the other people? Am I performing better? Is my audience liking me? That's your next step. And that's where most people peak. Then they're kind of in this competitive stage, outcome focused stage, if you will. The final stage is the superlative stage, where you're focused on your possible best. You're focused on competing with yourself. And that's when you're thinking, am I happy with what I did? It really doesn't matter if I won the Super Bowl, but am I happy with my performance? You're focused on mastering a task. You're not focused on the outcomes you generate. So most exceptionals have followed this journey of these three stages.
Well, before we close, I'd like to ask you just a few more questions. So, for you spent years immersed in stories and science of elite performers. What has changed most about how you personally structure your own work and life as a result? And maybe what then should listeners steal from your playbook tomorrow morning?
Yeah, so I just have a lot more awareness. I haven't put some of these ideas like commitment devices and process and goal setting and all that in place in my own life. I think the first thing is to have a goal because most people don't know where they're going. If you ask most people what they want to do in 10 years, they won't know, or they may just say something that may or may not be accurate. So kind of have that 10-year goal or 15-year goal. And once you have that goal, make sure you write it down because writing a goal makes it a lot more tangible uh, than just kind of keeping it in your mind. And when you write a goal down, the most important thing you need to do is actually write down why you want to achieve that goal, which no one does when they write goals. They kind of write goals. I want to, win something, or I want to achieve this thing, or I want to become the CEO. But below that, you write down why. And if you're able to adequately answer that why question, that goal setting becomes a lot easier. So I'd say start with that goal, which is longer term, and then you work backwards from it to what you need to do today. And that kind of gives you your process. And then you figure out how to get to each milestone you've set along.
How about for those managers or leaders who are parents and they want to raise exceptional kids? You have a great part of the book that covers that to say there's a common theme in terms of the environment that a lot of exceptionals grew up in, and it was one that fostered a very strong work ethic. If you could expand upon that and maybe give some insights to our listeners to say if you want kids that have the necessary foundations to be something great, here's what you really should be focusing on now.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So one of the things that I would focus on, and my kids are older now, but if they were young, is I would make sure that I taught them the link between effort and outcomes. I think that is one of the most important things parents can do is you put in the effort, you get the outcomes. So I would teach kids that. And then it's actually funny because, speaking with all these exceptionals, many of them had similar upbringings. They came from a competitive environment. They were competing with their siblings. Nothing was just given. You want a treat, you have to do the dishes. Just simple things like that. You just grow up in this environment that's competitive, where you have to earn every single thing. And those are the lessons that you just become so ingrained, part of you that they carry over to your profession and to every other thing you do.
I love that. It's your final comments, very powerful. Thank you so much, Dr. Kumar Mehta, for joining me today. Remind our listeners how they can get in contact with you and learn more about your work.
You can reach me on my website, kumarmehta.com, or email me at kumar@bridgesinsight.com. And I'm happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Before we wrap up, we want to offer a challenge to you. If you just heard how exceptional people actually grow through small intentional moves, the right environment, and the people that you need around you to push you forward, none of it was dramatic. All of it was deliberate. So here's the invite. Pick one area that matters. Give it 20 minutes of focused effort each day for the next 30 days. No multitasking, no perfection. And at the end of each day, with one sentence, how did you get 1% better today? That's how exceptional people become exceptional. That's how it becomes sustainable in your life, one quiet commitment at a time. And don't do this alone. Share this episode with someone that's going to hold you accountable, build your village, and progress compounds are going to be faster than you realize. So until next time, keep raising your standards, keep designing your environment, and keep moving forward together. I hope this episode has provided you with valuable insights. If it has, I ask you to share it with someone who would also benefit from it. If you've been enjoying and gaining knowledge from this podcast, then subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can find all the previous episodes of the podcast and additional learning resources. You can also subscribe to the podcast on Apple or Spotify and leave up to a 5-star review.